Welcome, sleepless spirit. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to guide you gently into the shadows of slumber, where dreams take over and worries fade away. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more bedtime tales, whispered just for you. Let me know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it as you listen tonight? And if there's a story you've been longing to hear, something spooky, something comforting, tell me. I'm always listening. Now, tuck yourself in. Let the darkness wrap around you like a warm blanket. It's time to let go and drift into the story. Anniversary trip would end with me standing at the edge of a waterfall, soaked to the bone and completely alone. It wasn't supposed to be like this, but I guess people rarely marry the monster. They just slowly watch the person they love become one. It started 9 years ago at a music festival outside of Asheville, North Carolina. That's where I met Aaron. I was to one reckless and hopeful. He was 28, older, confident, with that lazy southern charm that made everything feel warmer, even in the rain. I was fresh out of college and ready to be consumed by something bigger than me. He looked like that kind of fire. Aaron worked in construction. His hands were always calloused. His shirts always smelled faintly of sawdust and beer. But he made him laugh. He made me feel like was worth something. So when he asked me to move in just 3 months later, I said yes without hesitation. Then came the ring, then came the house, then the slowly burning resentment. I tried not to notice. He was never physically violent, not in the beginning. It was the kind of abuse you couldn't see in the mirror, but felt like a bruise beneath your ribs. Silent and as mocking laughter when I cried, watching me clean while he scrolled through his phone for hours. And then one day I found out why. Leia, that was her name, or at least that's what he saved her as in his phone. She worked with him. I pieced it together over time. Comments he'd made, things that didn't line up. Strange late hours, lipstick on his work jacket. That wasn't mine. I confronted him once. He laughed and said I was going crazy. So I stayed quiet. I played the loving wife, and I waited. I think this is the turn, I said, easing the car down a narrow gravel path, choked with ferns and low branches. The forest swallowed everything. No cars, no neighbors, just yous. And that's exactly why I picked this Airbnb. Aaron barely looked up from his phone. Doesn't look like much. It's not supposed to. It's quiet, secluded, just like you said you wanted. He muttered something and went back to scrolling. The cabin appeared at the end of the road, like it had been grown from the trees themselves. Rustic, small, a wraparound porch, dark with rainwater. The fog hung low, pressing into the earth like it wanted to smother everything beneath it. I turned off the car and silence folded around us like a heavy blanket. You know there's no Wi-Fi, right? Aaron said, finally looking at me with that familiar edge of sarcasm. That's the point. He rolled his eyes, grabbed his bag and lit a cigarette, the same brand he'd supposedly quit last year. I didn't say anything. I was too busy watching the way he smoked, twisted into the fog, soft, slow. Something dying inside the cabin was cold and smelled faintly of cedar and mildew. I busied myself unpacking. He made a show of lying on the couch and scrolling his phone, then complaining about the ancient wine glasses. At 10:03 p.m. we sat at the tiny dining table with soup between us and no conversation. Rain tapped lightly on the windows. You've been quiet, he finally said. I stirred my spoon, just thinking. He smirked. Wow, new hobby. I looked up at him. Why can't you just be decent for one day? Because this whole romantic getaway thing is a joke. He scarfed, leaning back in his chair. You think a weekend in the woods is going to fix all the reasons we don't talk anymore? Number, I thought it might remind us what we used to be, or at least give us a clean way to end this. He stood abruptly, pushing the table just hard enough to rattle the dishes. I should have left when I had the chance. Then why didn't you? He stared at me, the hint of cruelty in his smirk returning. Bess, I wanted you to break first. When he stormed out, he didn't take a coat, no flashlight, just his pride and that half-dead cigarette. I watched him vanish into the pine and waited 5 minutes before I got up. I wasn't worried. I knew the terrain better than he thought. I'd scoped the whole property online. The hiking reviews even picked this cabin because of that trail that led behind it, the one that ended at a waterfall with a 500 feet drop. Before I followed, I checked his phone. He tucked it behind the firewood on the porch like I wouldn't find it. Same passcode, same carelessness. The messages were still there. Leia had sent 3 hearts and a photo of herself in his work hoodie. His reply made my skin crawl. Him telling her this weekend. She's too pathetic to fight it. Something in me went cold and clean and sharp. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I picked up the old iron fire poker leaning beside the hearth and stepped out into the fog. It took 10 minutes to find him. He was standing near the overlook staring into the mist. You really followed me out here? He called without turning around. You left your phone, I said quietly. He turned to face me annoyed. So we're going to go through it again and pretend to be surprised? I'm not surprised, Aaron. Not anymore. He started walking toward me, hands raised in mock apology. Gleaner. That's when I swung the poker. A sharp crack split the air. As the metal struck his temple, he crumpled, instantly, pulse still there. Barely. I took a breath and looked toward the trees. The sound of rushing water was louder. Now dragging him wasn't easy. He was heavier than I thought. My boots slipped on moss and damp earth. But I didn't stop, not until I was at the edge of the waterfall. Not until the world below opened. Like a cold, hungry mouth, Aaron groaned. I knelt beside him, brushing wet hair from his forehead. This is what you get for underestimating me, I whispered. Then I pushed. No scream, no thrashing, just the sound of water. Swallowing everything back at the cabin, I peeled off my soaked clothes and went to work. I bruised my own shoulder on the counter, sliced my palm or a broken wine glass, threw his phone into the woods. I waited 30 minutes hyperventilating on cue. Then called 911 from the landline. My husband, I sobbed. He snapped. He hit him. He ran off into the woods. I think he might hurt himself. They believed me. Why wouldn't they? The perfect grieving wife, the bruises, the crying, the betrayal. Officers searched all night, drones, canine units, the works. They didn't find him. They never will. The Tennessee, different number, different job, therapy twice a month. Sometimes I still hear the water in my dreams. But I never feel guilt. Aaron died long before that waterfall ever touched him. He died the day he decided I wasn't enough. And I learned that sometimes you don't have to run from monsters. Sometimes you just have to push them. Duh wanted to go in the first place. It was Olivia's idea. Her birthday weekend, her rules. She'd found the cabin online through some obscure rental site. Not Airbnb, not Verbo, something called Pioneer Stay, which should have been our first red flag. The listing was suspiciously vague. Rustic mountain escape, total privacy, natural spring nearby, no specific address until you booked, no reviews, just a few moody black and white photos, pine trees, a crumbling porch, and a loft bed draped in mosquito netting. Was Bolly or something? We're adults, Olivia insisted, bouncing in her seat while she group fisted us all from her room. We need to get away, phones off, tequila on. Come on, Haley. When was the last time you even had fun? She wasn't wrong. It had been a rough year. My mom had passed in February, and I'd been spiraling in slow, silent ways ever since. Depression that felt like molasses in my bones, therapy that wasn't working, and a boyfriend who bailed right after the funeral. I'd stopped seeing people, stopped caring. So maybe you agreed to go just to feel something again. Anything. There were 5 of us. Olivia, the wild one, with a neon tongue ring, and no fear. Bria, her college roommate, all sarcasm and skeleton earrings. Jules, Briar's younger sister, quieter, always watching. Nikki, my co-worker, the practical one, big on plans and boundaries. And me, Haley, the girl who wanted to feel alive again, even if it killed her. We left early Friday morning. The drive was long, 4.5 hours into Northern California, winding through forgotten highways and barely there mountain roads. It was one of those routes where GPS stops updating and you start praying the laminated directions are legit. We lost cell signal halfway up the last dirt stretch, tires spinning over wet leaves and loose gravel. Olivia grinned from the passenger seat like it was all part of the adventure. I'll admit, when we finally arrived, the place looked right quiet, pine-shrouded, creepy in a storybook way. One crooked porch, a mossy shingled roof, the forest pressing in close as if holding its breath. The cabin was unlocked, no key, just a note taped to the inside. Welcome guests, please be respectful, no entry to the basement, enjoy your stay. The basement, Nikki said, frowning. I didn't know it had one. Every horror movie starts this way, Bria muttered, but she laughed and dropped her bag on the floor. We spent the first few hours settling in, opening windows, unpacking the groceries, blasting Olivia Rodrigo, while Olivia the person made margaritas. There was no Wi-Fi, no service, and Thepo flickered when we used more than one outlet at a time. But the view out back was gorgeous, a blur of green and golden fog that looked hand Painted. I tried to shake the bad feeling I had when we pulled up, but it clung to me like something damp. That first night was textbook girls' weekend chaos. Too many drinks, too much dancing, and old college stories retold louder than necessary. Played Never Have I Ever. Jules shy until her third cider confessed. She once dated a girl who'd stolen her dog Bria, admitted to shoplifting makeup for the adrenaline. Olivia went on a rant about reincarnation that had all of us howling by midnight. We were drunk, full of junk food, and huddled on the living room rug, trying to decide if the creaking in the walls was mice or the wind. It was Nikki who found the ring in the floor, not a jewelry ring, a metal one, rusted and recessed into the wooden planks beneath the threadbare rug trapdoor. She said, voice high, leave it alone. I said too quickly, but Bria was already pulling the rug back. The ring creaked in her hand as she tugged, would groaned like something being pried from a corpse, and then our square section of the floor lifted. With a snap, darkness yawned beneath a set of stone steps, led down into the earth. I thought the note said no basement. Nikki whispered. Exactly. Olivia grinned, which means there's something worth seeing down there. Olivia, come on, said, standing. You're drunk, so are you. She had our point. Was even wasted. My gut scream to leave it alone. Still she descended, laughing, light on her feet, flicking her phone flashlight on as the others exchanged nervous glances. Come on, Bria said, just a peek. Reluctantly, we followed. The air was colder below, musty, not moldy, and just cold like an open mouth. The basement wasn't finished, no drywall, no insulation, just packed dirt walls and wooden beams soaked with age. The ceiling sloped low, and we had to duck. Jules slipped on the third step and almost fell. This is what the hell, Nikki said softly. In the far corner of the basement sat a child-sized table, one tiny wooden chair. Around it scattered toys, a headless plush rabbit, a wooden top with black stains on the handle, a collection of dolls that made my stomach turn. One had no face, just smooth skin like melted wax. Another had its mouth sewn shut with actual thread. A third had hair that looked real. The table itself was carved with symbols some I recognized from horror movies. Others I didn't. Okay, said, we've seen it. Let's go. Bria didn't move. There's something on the wall. She pointed to a long stretch of scratches, tally marks, dozens of them, hundreds, maybe some old and faded, some new. Nikki backed away. No number. I'm done. This is sick. What? Olivia said, crouching. There's a book. She pulled it from beneath the table, a journal, half burned, smelling of ash on the cover. Carved with a shaky hand was one word, marrow. She opened to the last page. Her voice dropped as she read. Mom said the fire would take the evil out of me, but the fire only taught me to move. I'll wear someone new every night. I shivered. Put it down. Let's go. This place is messed up. Olivia didn't answer. She was staring at something behind me, the blackened outline of a candle circle in the dirt. You guys ever done a seance? She whispered. Nope. Number? Absolutely not, Nikki said, climbing the stairs. We're leaving. I'm not screwing around with this. But Olivia smiled. Come in. It's do it for fun. We'll light the candles, say the dumb lines, and prove it's just us done stories. And somehow we stayed. We sat in a circle. 5 candles lit. The shadows they cast didn't match our movements. Morrow, Olivia said, if you're here, give us a sign. The air changed, not colder, heavier. The candles didn't flicker. They drew inward like they'd been sucked towards something in the middle. That's enough, I said, standing. That's when the trap door slammed shut above us. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Jules screamed. Nikki rushed the stairs, trying the door. It stuck. It won't open. Olivia laughed, nervous. Now okay, jokes over, open it. I didn't do anything, Bria yelled. And then came the noise, wet, choking, gurgling, wet, and to see Jules on the floor convulsing, her spine arched like a bowring, her eyes rolled back. Her mouth opened, but made no sound. Help her, Nikki screamed, but no one moved. And then her voice changed, not hers anymore, low, guttural, layered, like multiple people were talking at once. Morrow, where's the flesh? Jules jerked upright faster than any human. Should her eyes were wrong. Germless black, dripping some kind of dark fluid, leaking upward across her cheeks. I know what you dreamed, she whispered. Jules. Olivia stepped forward, trembling. Jules, it's okay. We'll help. Snap. Her neck bent sideways with a noise that made Bria vomit. Then she crawled toward Use on all fours, her joints popping like insect legs. Olivia cuts herself and tells no one Bria stole from her dead grandmother. Nikki. She turned to Nikki, smiling with torn lips. You hit that dog and drove away. Nikki collapsed That's not how do you even breathe. Couldn't think. I grabbed the nearest thing, a rusted metal doll, and swung it hard. It cracked against Jules's skull. She dropped twitching. We ran. The trap door opened easily this time. The house was silent. Morning light filtered through the trees. Jules lay on the rug unconscious, her face peaceful again, her eyes brown. Then she screamed, a sound like an animal being torn open. She thrashed, coughed up black fluid, and passed out again. We didn't speak. We just carried her to the car and drove until we hit a town with cell service. Took her to the told the doctors it was a seizure. They ran tests, found nothing. They admitted her to psych. That was 3 weeks ago. I visited her yesterday. She doesn't speak now, doesn't look at anyone, just sits by the window with crayons. They give her drawing the same image over and over, a circle of candles, a child's table, a ring in the floor. And once, when the nurse stepped out, she looked at me. She smiled, her eyes turned black just for a second. It started with exhaustion, just the kind you feel after a long week at work or a sleepless night with a sick kid. This was bone deep marriage shaking, the kind of exhaustion where you're too tired to cry, too numb to care. My name is Leah, and I was 29 when we booked the cottage. Eric, my husband of almost 7 years, had been sleeping on the couch for 3 months. Our communication had dwindled to grunts and, "Did you feed the dog?" or "I'm running late after the miscarriage last winter." Something in us just cracked. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, it was silent and slow, like ice crawling across a windshield. So when Eric suggested we try a weekend getaway, just the two of us, no phones, no work, I agreed, not because I believed it would fix things, but because I didn't want to admit we were past fixing. He found the listing on some obscure site, not Airbnb, something more local, probably sketchy, a century-old country cottage tucked in a remote edge of Vermont about 4 hours from where we lived in Hartford, Connecticut. It looked cozy enough, exposed wood beams, stone fireplace, antique furniture, real rustic charm. The description claimed secluded, peaceful, a fresh start. We arrived late Friday afternoon. The GPS gave up about 2 me from the place, and the gravel road we turned onto looked more like a forgotten deer trail. Dense trees crowded the sides, blocking out most of the early autumn light. When we finally pulled into the small clearing, was immediately struck by how still everything was. Not peaceful, silent, turbulent. Looks like something out of a postcard, Eric said, forcing a smile. I didn't respond. My gaze drifted toward the house. The cottage was 2 stories, stone and weathered with ivy creeping up one side. It looked wrong, not decayed or haunted, just off, like a stage set after the actors have gone home. The windows were all shut, curtains drawn. Are we early? I asked. No, it said 3 o'clock p.m. Check-in. Someone's supposed to meet us. He opened his door. Come on, it's not, judge it before we've even gone inside. As if on cue, the front door creaked open, and a woman stepped out. She was ancient, stooped, and dry, like someone carved her from bark. Her hair was long and grey, tangled into a thick braid. She wore a faded green shawl, even though the air was still in warm. The Parkers? She asked, her voice surprisingly strong. Yes, Eric said. We booked for the weekend, the listing said. Someone would check us in. I'm the caretaker, she replied. I keep the keys clean between guests. She didn't smile, not even a hint of welcome in her eyes, just flat observation. Well, the place looks great. Eric offered, real cozy. She didn't answer. Instead, she held out a rusted key attached to a hand-carved wooden ring and pressed it into my palm. Do not disturb what isn't yours, she said, her fingers cold and tight on mine. Some things in this house, like being left alone. I blinked. I'm sorry. But she'd already turned around and shuffled down the path, disappearing into the trees behind the house, like smoke. Eric raised an eyebrow that was creepy as hell. Yeah, I muttered, still rubbing my hand inside. The place smelled off a heavy floral sweetness, like decaying lies in a sealed room. The scent thickened in the hallway and clung to the back of my throat. Still everything clean, old, sure, but well cared for. A tapestry hung above the stone fireplace, and mismatched vintage furniture filled the living room. Our bedroom was upstairs with low ceilings and an old four-poster bed. It should have felt romantic. Instead it felt watched. That's when I noticed it. The cradle, it sat in the far corner, half hidden in shadow, made of dark oak, hand carved, intricate, too antique to be decorative. It looked lived in, used, the kind of object that absorbed time. That's a weird thing to leave for guests, I murmured. Eric shrugged, dumping our bags on the bed. That's To the aesthetic, I guess. I don't like it. He glanced at me, want me to move it number. Just leave it that night. I couldn't sleep. Eric had passed out quickly, the firelight flickering across his features. His breathing was slow, heavy. But something else was breathing too. It was faint, wet, raspy, like air bubbling through mucus. My eyes snapped to the corner creak. The cradle rocked very gently back and forth, slow and deliberate. Eric, I whispered, grabbing his arm. Eric, wake up. HM. He blinked. What? Look. He followed my gaze. The cradle kept moving, probably a draft or something, he muttered, rolling over. I didn't sleep the next morning over breakfast. Eric looked at me, brow furrowed. You were talking in your sleep. What did I say? Something like it's empty. But it's not. I nearly dropped my coffee. Eric looked concerned. Are you okay? I don't know. He left to hike the nearby trails. Said he needed the fresh air. I stayed behind, pacing, watching the cradle. It felt wrong to even be near it. But something in me needed to see it. When I finally stepped closer, I felt it again. That pull, like the air was heavier near it. I knelt and ran a finger along the wood. That's when I saw them, scratches, fresh, deep, jagged grooves gouged into the wood like something had clawed its way out. One of them was sticky, still warm. That evening, we opened a bottle of wine. We sat by the fire talking for the first time in months. About the baby, the plans. We abandoned the name. We never used. Kayla by Friedrich held my hand. It felt like we were peeling open old wounds. But together this time. Then we heard it, a cry, high-pitched, piercing from upstairs. We both froze. Please tell me you heard that. I said. He nodded, pale. We stood, moved together toward the stairs. The crying grew louder, choked, wet sobs, like a baby drowning in its own tears. The bedroom door creaked open. The cradle sat still, empty. But the crying filled the room, seemed to pour from the walls, the floor, our very skin. Then laughter, thin, echoing, distant, and then to close. Mommy, Daddy, play with me. Every light in the house snapped off. Total blackness. I reached for Eric, but he was already moving. Something brushed my ankle. Tiny, cold. Eric screamed, a raw, primal sound. We ran, crushing through furniture, tripping, searching for the front door. Locked. We clawed at it. Windows sealed shut. The kitchen. Eric gasped. Back door. Something followed, a dragging sound, scraping. Mommy, don't leave me again. Scared, Eric threw himself against the door. It didn't budge. Again. Cracked. The air turned ice cold. I'm freezing. Something whispered in my ear. On the third slam, the door shattered. We exploded into the night. I didn't feel the gravel under my feet, the branches cutting my face. I didn't care. Eric shoved the keys into ignition. The car sputtered. I looked back the upstairs window. On a room, a figure, small, thin, its face split wide, with an unnatural smile. Raised one hand, pressed it to the glass, mouthed something. I will never forget. I'll find you. We didn't talk the entire ride home. Didn't sleep, didn't eat. Days passed. I couldn't shake the feeling, so I searched, dug deep, eventually found a library blog from a Vermont Historical Society. One article caught my eye. Infant found dead in abandoned cottage, 1991. A young woman had left her baby boy in the house. While she went to town, she never came back. Neighbors found the child days later, dead, cold, starved. They never located the mother. But her diary was found. It spoke of shame, of hiding the pregnancy, of wishing she'd never had him. The final entry read, he cries all the time. He doesn't sleep. I'll fix that. He won't be alone. Always send him someone to play with until I can come back for him. Owed it to Eric. Heavily blinked. I don't want to talk about it, he said. But what if Leah let it go? But I can't, because every night since we came home I hear it, a creak, then another coming from the corner of our bedroom, and in my dreams I see that cradle empty. But not. I never imagined my wedding would happen in a borrowed dress with a $10 bouquet in front of a computer screen. But that's what Co did to people. No family, no cake cutting, no first dance. Just a video call, a quiet civil ceremony, and 2 rings exchanged. In a nearly empty government office in coastal Southridge, Australia. My husband Aiden always said we'd do something special when the world opened up again. But as the months passed, we grew used to the quiet life. We never had a honeymoon. We moved into a small rental, got new jobs, and settled into a rhythm. But I still wanted something, some closure to the wedding that never really felt like one. So for our 1-year anniversary, Aiden surprised me with a weekend away, not a luxury hotel or a spa, but something more personal, at a night stay at a cozy Airbnb in a secluded area, just a short drive out of town, along the shoreline. He said the place had great reviews, private, peaceful, charming. He read aloud from the listing, showing me photos. A tiny white cottage nestled behind a larger house bordering a patch of native bushland, and a short walk from the water. It looked perfect, and honestly at first it was we left after work on a Friday. The sun was just beginning to dip as we pulled into the long gravel driveway. The main house sat about 30 feet ahead, a well-kept home, with ivy crawling up the brick off to the side. Almost hidden behind a thicket of tall shrubs was our little cottage. It was quaint, a single-story building with whitewashed siding, a small wooden deck, and a large glass sliding door. A motion sensor light clicked on. Louis approached, casting a warm glow over the entryway. The key was in a lockbox. Just as the host, Karen, had messaged us, we let ourselves in. Inside it was better than the photos. Clean, cozy, a little rustic, 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom, and an open-plan kitchen. And there was even a bottle of cheap wine and to wrapped chocolates waiting on the counter. Aiden gave me a grin and kissed my cheek. Still think I'm bad at planning surprises? Okay, as admit it. I laughed. You did good. The first few hours were uneventful. We unpacked, made pasta, watched a show on my laptop, laughed, talked for a moment. I felt like we were exactly where we were supposed to be, finally celebrating our marriage in our own quiet way. But that didn't last long. It was just after 10:30 p.m. I was picking up our dinner plates while Aiden went to brush his teeth. The bedroom was dim lit only by the radiant lamp on the nightstand. I knelt to put my slippers under the bed and noticed a shallow drawer built into the base. Curious, I pulled it open. There wasn't much inside, just an old magazine, some dust, and a slim red notebook. At first I thought it might be the kind of welcome book most Airbnbs leave you. No restaurant recommendations, Wi-Fi password, emergency contacts. But when I opened the cover, it was handwritten in different inks, different handwritings, different tones. The first page was dated from 2 years ago. It started cheerful enough. We loved our stay here. The bird song in the morning was magical. Another said, spent our anniversary here. The forest is lovely, such a peaceful place to disconnect. But then things changed midway through the book. The notes became erratic, sloppy, paranoid. Heard footsteps around the house last night. Thought it was an animal at first, but I don't know. Didn't sleep well. Someone knocked 3 times at exactly 3:03 a.m. Not kidding. Nobody was out. Detta, the next person reading this, don't ignore the sounds. Trust your instincts. Leave. My skin prickled. I flipped ahead, tried to call for help. No signal. Host never responded. Thought we were being watched. Still think we are. Some of Feliter entries had lines scratched out angrily, violently. Others were blotted with ink. Several pages were torn out completely. Then I found the worst one. It was written in tiny, frantic handwriting. Don't let him in if he asks. If everything's okay. Lines. Open the door, hide the book, hide it. They know. A floorboard creaked behind me. I snapped the book shut and looked up. Aiden stood there, towel draped over his shoulder, toothbrush in hand. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said. I held up the notebook. This isn't a guest book. You need to see this. We sat on the bed together, flashlight on, going page by page. Some were unreadable from the black marker slashed across them. Aiden held the flashlight behind one of the pages to see if we could make out the text. We could. He left a black bag. It had gloves, rope, a syringe. I froze. And that's when we heard it. Footsteps crunching on the gravel outside. Slow, deliberate. Aiden turned off the flashlight. We sat frozen in the dark. Then click. The front door handle turned softly. Then again a voice followed. Just checking in. Everything all right in there? It wasn't Karen's voice. It was a man, low, common, familiar. Aiden stood and motioned for me to stay back. He crept toward the door and peered through the tiny frosted glass peephole. His jaw clenched. He turned to me and mouthed, "Not the host." I joined him slowly. The man outside was wearing a dark jacket, black gloves, and a beanie. He was holding a black duffel bag, and he was unlocking the door. The lock clicked once. Aiden grabbed my hand and pulled mine to the bathroom. There was a small window over the sink, tiny, but maybe enough. He helped me up first. My legs scraped against the sill as I forced my way through. I landed hard on my side, but scrambled to my feet. Aiden followed seconds later, panting. We didn't wait. We ran through the shrubs into the forest. Sticks cracked under our shoes. Branches clawed at our clothes. We didn't speak. Eventually, the trees thinned, and we hit a small rural road. A delivery van was heading our way. Aiden ran into the middle of the road, waving both arms. The driver stopped. We climbed in without explanation. The man just asked where we wanted to go. We told him police, nearest station please. He drove. We gave our statement to the officers at the Southridge police station. They were skeptical. They sent a car out to the Airbnb a couple hours later. They came back. There's nothing there, the officer said. House is locked. No signs of forced entry. No notebook. We insisted, told them about the guest book. The message is the man, the bag. The officer shrug. Owner says only she and her husband have keys. Claims she's never heard of any notebook. She says she's hosting another couple next weekend. Can you at least check for fingerprints? I asked. She's not pressing charges. No crime's been committed. I wanted to scream. Den just stared at the floor. A week later, we tried to pull up the listing. Gone. Just the property, the entire profile. Karen didn't exist on Airbnb anymore. We called Airbnb and reported the incident. They said they'd investigate. We never heard back. We don't stay in a beans anymore. I always read reviews. Now I call the host before booking. I never stay anywhere too remote. And I never ignore a gut feeling. Sometimes I wonder if we were being watched long before we arrived. Our names were on that reservation. What if that wasn't Karen's property at all? What if it was a trap? A trap. I still think about that notebook, those voices from the past, those frantic warnings from strangers who were just like us, looking for peace, looking to celebrate something special. And instead they found him. I hadn't taken a single break in over a year. The burnout didn't sneak up on me. It crushed me slow and brutal. I'm a systems analyst based in Portland, and 4 months my life had been a loop of endless screens, meetings and deadlines. Wake up, log in, work, crash, rinse and repeat. I wasn't eating right. I wasn't sleeping. My neck constantly ached from hunching over my laptop, and I snapped at my sister for leaving a dish in the sink. One Monday morning I sat in the break room at work, staring blankly at the coffee machine, and realized I had tears running down my face. No trigger, just empty overflow. A manager, Claire, kind, sharp, always watching, pulled me into a private meeting and said gently, Daniel, take a break before your body decides for you. She was right. That evening I opened Airbnb and searched for some place remote. I wanted silence, nature, nothing fancy, just a tiny rental where I could unplug, walk in the woods, read a paperback and maybe feel like myself again. Found a listing called Stillwater Cabin. It was a small cedar wood home 2.5 hours outside Portland, near a sparsely populated area called Grey Pines Reserve. The photos showed a quiet single-story cabin tucked beneath pine trees, 1 bedroom, a fireplace, a porch, and a hiking trail starting right behind the backyard. No Wi-Fi, no neighbors, no city noise. Perfect. The host's name was Michael Emery. His profile photo was just a forest trail, but he had dozens of 5-star reviews. People praised the cabin's quietness, the clean layout, the lack of distractions. A few though said strange things. One review said, just follow Michael's rules and it'll be the perfect escape. Another said sounds at night are normal, ignore them, trust Michael. I figured it was just rural weirdness. I've been in cabins where raccoons sound like burglars. No big deal. I booked it for 4 nights. The day before I left, Michael messaged, hi Daniel, 2 rules during your stay. 1, don't unplug the attic fan. 2, do not open the basement door, even if you hear something. No explanation, no small talk, just that I stared at the message for a while before texting my friend Ben. He sent back, creepy, but honestly probably just some old wiring or a mold issue. Just don't poke around, enjoy your break. I wanted to believe that, so I packed my bag, downloaded some music and books offline, and left the next morning. The drive was beautiful, long stretches of evergreen, occasional creek. I got closer to Great Pines. The cell signal dropped to nothing. I expected that Stillwater Cabin was easy to find. It looked exactly like the photos. Modest, wooden, peaceful. A porch swing creaked slightly in the wind. Pine needles blanketed the ground. I used the keypad Michael gave me, stepped inside, and felt tension immediately melt from my shoulders. It smelled like cedar and dust. Inside was a small living room with a stone fireplace, a worn couch, and shelves filled with second-hand books. A tiny kitchen sat to the right down the hallway, with a bedroom, the bathroom, and a pull-down ladder labeled attic access above the ceiling. I remembered Michael's message and looked up. A small square fan was mounted in the attic opening. It hummed softly, circulating air into the hallway. I stared at it a while, uneasy, but moved. On the fridge was a handwritten note. Welcome Daniel, enjoy the quiet. The cabin takes care of you if you respect it. Michael, cryptic. But I was tired and Thesilence was already working. I spent the rest of the day reading on the porch, letting the Wind rocked the swing and the sun warmed my face. That night I made pasta, poured wine and slept for the first time in what felt like months at 1:11 a.m. I woke to footsteps above me. They were soft, slow pacing. My first thought was raccoons, but then I remembered the attic fan. The crawl space above the hallway was maybe 2 feet high, too small for anything human. I crept into the hallway and looked up. The fan was still humming. The attic door was closed, but I swear I heard breathing heavy from right behind the panel. I backed away. Didn't sleep the rest of the night. By morning, had convinced myself it was just the house settling. I made strong coffee, walked into the woods, and tried to shake the strange feeling hanging over me that afternoon. While cooking, the overhead light flickered. Then the attic fan slowed down, not stopped, just struggled like something was resisting it. I stared at it for a while, then grabbed a chair and climbed up to inspect. The fan was still plugged in. The blades turned slowly, then click. It stopped. In the new silence I heard a sound I'll never forget, a voice, mine, whispering my name, Daniel. I stepped off the chair, heart racing. The voice faded. I didn't leave the bedroom that night. I locked the door, pushed the dresser in front of it, and sat on the edge of the bed, gripping the flashlight from the kitchen. At 2:03 a.m. I heard scratching from inside the walls, followed by whispering again. My own voice, desperate, panicked. Let me out, Daniel. Then silence. I must have passed out sometime around dawn. Was ready to leave, but when I tried to start the car it wouldn't turn over, battery dead. I checked my phone again, still no signal. I walked to the nearest trail marker, hoping to get signal on higher ground, but there in the soft dirt near the cabin were footprints my size, my exact shoe treads, circling the cabin. Again and again and again. I couldn't sleep. I sat on the porch with a flashlight until the wind picked up and knocked the swing into the wall. Then I went back inside and locked every door. At 1:48 a.m. I heard a knock at the back window. I froze. Then my voice again, Daniel, come downstairs. I didn't move. The knocking continued, louder, more urgent. I finally gathered the nerve to check the hallway. The basement door, which I hadn't even noticed earlier, was open. A small paper note lay just outside it. Down, or I come in. And I stood there for a long time, trembling. Then I did something I still regret. I stepped inside. It was colder than it should have been and darker. My flashlight flickered constantly. Even though it had new batteries, the air was thick, metallic, wet. At the bottom, the room opened into an old root cellar. Bare concrete. A tall mirror leaned against far wall. In the mirror was me, except I was smiling, and I wasn't the reflection. Reached out of hand, placed it flat against the glass. I felt heat against my real hand. Even though I hadn't moved, I ran. I didn't turn back. I ran up the stairs, out the cabin door, and into the trees barefoot. I hid for what felt like hours behind a tree trunk. Weenie came back just after dawn. The cabin looked still. The basement door was closed again. I got in my car. It started immediately. I didn't stop driving until I saw cell towers back in the city. I reported the incident to Airbnb, but Stillwater cabin gone. Michael Emery, and no longer a registered host. The listing had vanished completely. A few days later, I got an email. Your review has been posted. Wonderful. Stay. Would absolutely return. Left a bit early, but only because I couldn't wait to come back. I wrote that, and ever since sometimes I hear faint whispers behind my bathroom mirror. Sometimes my attic fan slows down in the middle of the night, and sometimes when I look out the window I see someone standing on my porch, wearing my clothes, smiling, waiting. I never imagined that something meant to heal our family would turn into something that fractured us in ways we still can't explain. It started with burnout. Mark and I had been married for 26 years, and we were quietly drifting. He was in his 3rd year of a regional operations position that had him managing 4 districts, leaving home before sunrise and returning long after dark. Her daughter Sarah had recently come back home and graduating with a degree in art history. Unsure about her future, she'd tried job hunting, volunteering, even a short internship. All of it stuck, was left managing the quiet tension between all of us, pretending we were fine while folding laundry and cooking dinners no one seemed to want. That's why one afternoon in early October, I started looking at Airbnb listings. It wasn't some grand decision. It just happened after I'd spent 2 hours scrubbing the baseboards and finally sat down with a cup of lukewarm coffee. The ad that caught my eye was for a historic homestead tucked in the flatlands of southern Colorado, an 1890s ranch house that had supposedly been lovingly restored with original details intact. The photo showed a long front porch, a dusty red roof, and a backdrop of endless plains against jagged peaks. "Look at this," I said, tilting my laptop towards Sarah. Later that evening, wouldn't a break from everything be good? She leaned over the couch, arm brows drawn, kind of looks like something out of No Country for Old Men. "I think it's charming," I said, forcing a smile. "And it's far away from everything." That part convinced her. When Mark got home that night, I pitched the idea. He barely looked up from removing his tie, but murmured, "If he will get us out of this house, I'm in." 2 days later, we were on the road. The house sat 5 miles off a barely paved road, surrounded by nothing but short grass, rustling cottonwoods, and silence. No other homes in sight. The air was crisp and a bit dry, making my lips crack within hours. From the outside, the house looked exactly like the pictures. Old wood, sun-faded paint, a few creaks in the porch boards, but it was standing strong. He got an odd sense the place had been waiting, watching. Inside, it smelled faintly of pine and something else I couldn't name, sweet and a little metallic like old pennies. But it was clean, quiet. I reminded myself again that this was supposed to be a peaceful getaway. That first night was better than expected. We made pasta, opened a bottle of winning, played cards by lantern light. Since the power flickered more than once, the air carried a stillness that was unnerving at first, but soon felt calming later. While Mark fell asleep beside me, I stayed up reading a worn paperback I'd brought at some point. I felt a sudden chill and reached down to pull the quilt tighter. That's when I felt it to hand scold, a stone wrapping around my ankles beneath the covers. I gasped and kicked instinctively. "Sarah!" I sat up, my heart hammering, but the room was still, lit only by the moonlight. Through the curtain, Mark snored gently beside me. The door was cracked open, and across the hall Sarah's door was shut tight. I stood, my feet shaking, and padded to her room. Was asleep, curled up, undisturbed. I didn't sleep much after that. The next day I told myself I'd imagined it. I was exhausted. Maybe I'd just been dreaming. We spent most of the day exploring a small town called Las Aviotas, about 20 minutes away. It was quiet, dotted with antique stores, and a diner that made the best pecan pie ever tasted. When Werrit and Sarah volunteered to cook dinner, Mark offered to help, and I relaxed on the faded green couch with a view of the kitchen. That's when I saw something that made my blood run cold. From the hallway beside the stairs, a tall, dark shape, clearly human, walked slowly across the room, passing directly between me and the kitchen. It didn't look at me. It didn't make a sound. It simply disappeared into the opposite wall. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I sat frozen, gripping the couch until the fabric creaked beneath my fingers. When I finally told Sarah later that night, she didn't laugh. Her expression turned deadly serious. "I've been hearing whispers," she said quietly, "in the hallway late at night. I thought maybe you and Dad were talking, but it wasn't your voices." I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to alarm Mark, who had finally started relaxing, so we kept it between us that night. Sarah moved her bedding to the living room, refusing to sleep alone. The next morning, Mark went into town for supplies. He joked that we should enjoy the digital detox and see who could survive longest without their phones. None of us had cell service here, and the Wi-Fi was barely functional. Once he was gone, Sarah and I decided to look around the house more closely. I travel a lot for tournaments, not glamorous travel, no beachfront resorts or room service breakfasts, but the cheap, cramped kind, airports, rentals and budget beds. I've been competing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for nearly a decade now. At this point, my duffel bag is basically my second home, where I bunk with teammates to save money. Most gyms split airbands or crash at a buddy's house if we're lucky enough to know someone local. But this time it didn't work out that way. In November 2021, was scheduled to compete in a small West Coast event, not Vegas. People always think Vegas when they hear about West Coast tournaments, but this one was in a mid-sized city in Nevada called Sunnydale. And not exactly a hotspot. Flights were cheaper into Reno, and from there it was a 2-hour drive. Was cutting it close financially, so I found a cheap Airbnb on short notice. The profile looked decent, nothing fancy. The host's profile pic was a sunflower. The reviews were mostly positive, 1 or 2 neutral ones, but no horror stories. I booked it without overthinking. A small studio apartment attached to a private home, just a night or two. I told myself, in and out. I arrived just before dark. The neighborhood was off, not terrible, just worn down, peeling paint, mismatched fences, stray cats pacing the sidewalk. I didn't see the host, which I expected. They'd messaged me the keypad code and instructions. The door was to the left off garage, behind a wooden gate that stuck when I tried to open it. The studio smelled like lemon cleaner and stale air. Nothing jumped out as dangerous. The bed was made, lights worked, and there were no cameras that I could see. But something about it felt hollow, cold. I chalked it up to nerves. Cutting weight always makes me edgy. I set my bag down and texted my girlfriend, told her I made it. Hair swear things start getting strange. The keypad code to get in was 12345667. I'm not kidding, I actually laughed when I typed it in. I thought, okay, maybe this host just isn't tech savvy. I mean, the Wi-Fi password was literally just password. That made me pause longer than I'd like to admit. But I wasn't trying to be paranoid, was tired, hungry, and had to weigh in early the next morning. I grabbed some takeout and ate in silence, with the small TV playing a game show on low volume. By 9:30 p.m. I was horizontal scrolling through my phone with the lights out. That's when I heard it tap tap tap. It came from the window directly in front of the bed. The blinds were closed, but I froze. It wasn't loud, just deliberate close. I sat up slowly, straining to hear tap tap tap. I said out loud, her, not a yell, but loud enough to let whoever was outside know Fatsamian was inside. The tapping stopped, just like that. I stared at the blinds, waited silence. I didn't want to seem paranoid, but I texted the host right away, hey, was that you at the window just now? No reply. I waited 10 minutes, 15, was getting that prickle on the back of my neck, the one you get when something's wrong, but your brain hasn't caught up yet. I couldn't shake it. Eventually, about 45 minutes later, the host texted back, sorry, was going to bring you water, and that thought you were asleep, so I left. That made no sense. Why tap instead of knock? And why the window, not the door? Still, I tried to reason it away. Was alone in an unfamiliar city, in a bad part of town. Maybe I was overreacting, but I didn't sleep. I lay there, phone in hand, heart thudding every time the house creaked. Around midnight, I heard it again, this time from the door. Beep, 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 the keypad. Someone was entering the code. My blood turned to ice. Beep, 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 click. The lock disengaged. I shot out of bed, adrenaline roaring. I hit the floor barefoot, sprinted across the small space, and slammed my body against the door. Just as it began to open inward, a man's deep voice grunted, surprised. I yelled, this is my room, get the underscore out of here. He replied calmly, coldly, this is my room. The name he used next hit me like a punch to the stomach. Mikael said, this is his room, Mikael, the host's name from the profile. I yelled louder, hoping to scare him off. I'm calling the police right now. He wanted him to know I meant it. I'm on the phone with them now. He didn't say anything else, but I heard him walk away slowly, like he wasn't in any kind of rush. I locked the deadbolt again, then pushed the small dresser in front of the door. My fingers were shaking so bad it took me to tries to dial 911. When the cops arrived, I was still barefoot, standing in the corner holding a kitchen knife I'd grabbed for defense. They took me statements. Their expressions didn't show surprise, just fatigue. One of them muttered, we've gotten a few weird calls from this address before. I asked, why is it still listed then? I travel a lot for tournaments, not glamorous travel, no beachfront resorts or room service breakfasts, but the cheap, cramped kind, airports, rentals and budget beds. I've been competing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for nearly a decade now. At this point, my duffel bag is basically my second home. Virally, I bunk with teammates to save money. Most gyms split Airbnbs or crash at a buddy's house if we're lucky enough to know someone local. But this time it didn't work out that way. In November 2021, was scheduled to compete in a small West Coast event, not Vegas. People always think Vegas when they hear about West Coast tournaments, but this one was in a mid-sized city in Nevada called Sunningdale. Exactly. Hotspot flights were cheaper into Reno, and from there it was a 2-hour drive. Was cutting it close financially, so I found a cheap Airbnb on short notice. The profile looked decent, nothing fancy. The host's profile pic was a sunflower. The reviews were mostly positive, 1 or 2 neutral ones, but no horror stories. I booked it without overthinking. A small studio apartment attached to a private home. Just a night or two, I told myself, in and out. I arrived just before dark. The neighborhood was Off, not terrible, just worn down peeling paint, mismatched fences, stray cats pacing the sidewalk. I didn't see the host, which I expected they'd messaged me the keypad code and instructions. The door was to the left off garage, behind a wooden gate. That stuck when I tried to open it. The studio smelled like lemon cleaner and stale air. Nothing jumped out. As dangerous the bed was made, lights worked, and there were no cameras that I could see. But something about it felt hollow, cold. I chopped it up to nerves. Cutting weight always makes me edgy. I set my bag down and texted my girlfriend, told her I made it. Here's where things start getting strange. The keypad code to get in was 12345667. I'm not kidding, I actually laughed when I typed it in. I thought, okay, maybe this host just isn't tech savvy. I mean, the Wi-Fi password was literally just password. That made me pause longer than I'd like to admit. That I wasn't trying to be paranoid, was tired, hungry, and had to weigh in. Early the next morning I grabbed some takeout and ate in silence, with the small TV playing a game show on low volume by 9:30p. I was horizontal scrolling through my phone with the lights out. That's when I heard it tap tap tap. It came from the window directly in front of the bed. The blinds were closed. That I froze. It wasn't loud, just deliberate close. I sat up slowly, straining to hear tap tap tap. I said out loud, "Huh." Not a yell, but loud enough to let whoever was outside know that someone was inside. The tapping stopped. Just like that, I stared at the blinds, waited silence. I didn't want to seem paranoid, but I texted the host right away, "Hey, was it you at the window just now?" No reply. I waited 10 minutes, 15. Was getting that prickle on the back of my neck. The one you get when something's wrong, but your brain hasn't caught up yet. I couldn't shake it eventually. About 45 minutes later, the host texted back, "Sorry, was going to bring you water, but thought you were asleep, so I left." That made no sense. Why tap instead of knock? And why window, not the door? Still, I tried to reason it away. Was alone in an unfamiliar city, in a bad part of town. Maybe I was overreacting. But I didn't sleep. I lay there, phone in hand, heart throbbing. Every time the house creaked around midnight, I heard it again. This time, from the door, beep beep beep, keypad. Someone was entering the code. My blood turned to ice. Beep beep beep. Click, the lock disengaged. I shot out of bed, adrenaline roaring. I hit the floor barefoot, sprinted across the small space, and slammed my body against the door. Just as it began to open inward, a man's deep voice grunted, surprised. I yelled, "This is my room, get the underscore out of here." He replied calmly, coldly, "This is my room." The name he used next hit me like a punch to the stomach. Mikhail said, "This is his room, Mikhail, the host's name from the profile." I yelled louder, hoping to scare him off. "We're calling the police right now." I wanted him to know I meant it. "I'm on the phone with them now." He didn't say anything else, but I heard him walk away slowly, like he wasn't in any kind of rush. I locked the deadbolt again, then pushed the small dresser in front of the door. My fingers were shaking so bad it took me to try Todio 911. When the cops arrived, I was still barefoot, standing in the corner holding a kitchen knife I'd grabbed for defense. They took my statement. Their expressions didn't show surprise, just fatigue. One of them muttered, "Yeah, we've gotten a few weird calls from this address before." I asked, "Why is it still listed then?" The officer didn't answer directly. He just said, "You should find another place for the night." They waited while I packed up and called an Uber. As I was rolling my bag out the gates, I saw someone peeking from behind the curtain of the main house. A man, maybe mid-40s, southboarding, wearing a white tank top. I never got a good look at the person who tried to come in. I never found out for sure if it was the host, a squatter, or something worse. But I can shake the feeling it was planned, not just a random mix-up. Here's why I think that I arrived from the East Coast. My body was on a different clock. So when I was lying in bed at 9:30 p.m, it felt like midnight to me. The first window tap, it came when I'd be most tired, most vulnerable. The break-in 3 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time, a deep sleep hour. That kind of timing isn't random, even creepier later. I found the studio smoke alarm wasn't connected, just a black disc in the ceiling. And when I looked inside the closet before leaving, I noticed a thin vent in the wall that connected to the main house, a vent big enough to slide something through. I don't know what McCall's plan was. Robbery, maybe something worse, maybe. But I do know this: when I got into that Uber and the driver asked why I looked so shaken, I couldn't answer. I just kept watching the rearview mirror, making sure no one followed. Since then, I've never booked an Airbnb without triple checking the host, the neighborhood, and the exit plan, still compete, still travel. But I trust my instincts now. If something feels off, don't rationalize it, don't wait, get out. I was on the verge of a big career shift. When all this happened, my name's Rachel. I'd been working remotely for a small marketing agency in California, with 30 freelance contracts, trying to build my portfolio while waiting for something bigger. In January of 2022, I finally got an email. I wasn't sure I'd ever see an interview offer from a boutique firm I'd been following for years. They were based out of a small town in New Mexico, just outside of Albuquerque, remote enough that a quick trip wouldn't cut it. He wasn't in the financial position to drop money on a fortnight hotel stay, so I did what a lot of people do nowadays. I opened Airbnb. I found a place that was nearly half the price of the cheapest hotel nearby. It wasn't anything fancy, but the photos showed a quaint single-story adobe guest house with a big backyard and desert views, private, clean. It had great reviews too. A few other guests had mentioned the solitude and the beautiful sunrise. That was enough for me. The host, someone named George M., messaged me the morning that I booked. Very short and polite. Hi Rachel, check-in instructions are in the app. Let me know if you need anything. Enjoy your stay. That was Monday morning. I'll be staying through Friday with the interview scheduled for Wednesday at 10 o'clock a.m. I packed light, some business clothes, my laptop, a few groceries, and made the 8-hour drive from my place in Santa Clarita. By the time I reached the Airbnb that evening, it was nearly dark. The road it was on wasn't marked on Google Maps properly. My GPS had me turn onto what looked like a service road off highways, surrounded by mesquite shrubs and scrub brush, no houses in sight. I kept driving until a rusted street sign finally came into view. Chero, a full lane. It felt like I had gone too far into nowhere. But then I spotted the house. It sat low against the horizon, a pale clay exterior that matched the dirt around it. One long gravel driveway, one lone mailbox, no streetlights. The back of the house open to nothing but flat desert. It was eerily quiet. I reminded myself that I was here for work, not a vacation, and this would probably save me at least $300. Once inside, I was honestly impressed. The interior looked cleaner than in the photos. Modern furniture, a small kitchenette, big windows with curtains pulled open. The bedroom had one queen-sized bed, a dresser, and a small closet with mirrored doors. I unpacked, cracked open my laptop at the kitchen counter, and started going over notes for the interview. The quiet helped me focus. No traffic, no neighbors, no noise at all. By 8:30, was sipping tea and practicing common questions out loud, the kind where you feel like a lunatic talking to yourself. Why do you want this job? What's your biggest weakness? Tell me about a time you solved a problem at work. That's when I heard it tap software, quick like a fingertip. It came from the window just left of the front door. I froze mid-sentence. My head jerked toward the sound before I even fully processed it. The curtains were open, but I couldn't see anything outside yet. It was black out there, completely black. I don't mean the romantic kind of desert night black. If you stepped 5 feet from the house, you disappeared. My heart rate ticked up, but I told myself, what anyone would. It's probably a moth or a bug hitting the glass. Could be anything. I walked over cautiously, turned on the porch light and peeked outside. Nothing still. I pulled the curtain shut, unlocked the front door, even though it was already locked. Just in case, I made myself finish one more hour of prep before crawling into bed. The morning came bright and clear. Sunlight poured through the blinds. The tension from the night before melted away quickly. I reminded myself was just tired and on edge because of the interview. By 9:30 a.m. I was parked outside the firm's office. By 10:45, was shaking hands and thanking them for their time, feeling like I'd actually done pretty well. I spent the rest of the day exploring. There wasn't much to see nearby, mostly gas stations and diners, but I found a great taqueria and ate outside. Then I grabbed a coffee and went back to the Airbnb. I took my laptop out to the backyard patio, sat under the little awning, and let the sun hit my skin while catching up on some client work for a few hours. It felt like a mini vacation at some points, though I got that weird sensation, and the wrong one, was watching May. You know, the kind it starts as a tickle at the back of your neck. I looked behind me, nothing. I looked to the left across the low fence into the desert brush, empty still. Maybe was just paranoid. I packed up and went inside before sunset. I made myself some ramen and streamed Better Call Saul on my laptop. Figured it was appropriate for New Mexico. Of night fell fast around 9:45 p.m. I heard it again, tap, same spot, same sound, the window next to the front door. I dumped. It was unmistakable now, not a morph, not the wind. Someone had tapped the window. I muted the laptop and crept to the door, peering through the peephole. Nothing. I flicked on the porch light, still nothing. I waited, listened. Then I stepped outside for a second, cautiously walking out onto the porch. I called out, hello. No answer. I started to go back inside. If that's when I heard it click, a sharp noise, like someone clicking their tongue. It came from the dark beyond the backyard fence. My whole body froze. I turned slowly, and I saw him, a figure, maybe 40 feet out, in the brush, standing completely still, wearing dark clothing like black or navy. No flashlight, no phone screen, nothing reflective, just standing. He didn't move. I felt adrenaline surge hitting through my chest. I took one step toward the edge of the patio and said loudly, you're on private property. I'm calling the police. That finally made him move. But the way he moved was off. No panic, no running, just a slow, purposeful turn and walk into the desert. I didn't sleep much that night. I seriously considered checking out and finding a hotel, but everything nearby was booked solid due to some car show in the next town over. Plus, I told myself, maybe it was just some random drifter. Maybe I scared him off. Maybe I was safe now. Thursday passed uneventfully. I didn't leave the house, except to grab food from a drive-thru. I kept the curtains closed all day. By night, I was exhausted and just wanted to pretend like nothing had happened. I got into bed, watched a few episodes of Better Call Saul, and eventually turned out the light. 10 seconds later, click from the closet. I sat up like I'd been shocked. The closet door was open about an inch. I had left it open earlier, I was sure of that. But this sound was different than before. It was inside the house. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my ears. And then another click, closer this time. That was it. I grabbed my phone and sprinted to the car, barefoot, pajamas on, not even caring. I got in, locked the doors and turned the engine on. Then I called 911. The dispatcher stayed on the line with me as I stared at the front door of the house, waiting, convinced someone was going to come out. No one did. A county sheriff's deputy showed up about 20 minutes later. We went inside together. He did a sweep of the house, checked the closets, the attic, crawl space, even under the bed. No one, nothing broken, no forced entry, no fingerprints. But the deputy looked at the front door lock and said something that chilled me. This kind of smart lock had codes remotely. If the owner's shady, he could give himself one and erase it later. I packed up my things that second and left. I booked a hotel room an hour outside the town and didn't sleep until the sun came up. I reported everything to Airbnb. I even asked if they could verify if George M. had accessed the log remotely, but they claimed they had no way to prove that. The host messaged me once after I filed the complaint, sorry, you felt unsafe, and one else has ever had issues, hope you're okay. I got half my money back. I never heard anything more from the police. No follow-up, no investigation. It was just another unsolved scare in the middle of the desert. But I know what I felt, I know what I saw, and I still wonder who was in that closet. Or maybe the better question is, how long had they been there? I thought a weekend in the woods might save what was left of us. It was August 2016. Things had been tense between me and my boyfriend Neil. For any dramatic reason, we weren't yelling or breaking things, but for the quieter kind of strained long silences, passive remarks, fights that never quite started, but never really ended. Either we lived in Brooklyn, then buried in work and noise. I taught middle school. He worked for a local paper, and the city had been sucking us dry 4 months. I figured some time away might fix it, or at least give us a chance to remember why we still bothered. So I booked a weekend stay. Through Airbnb I found a cabin deep in the Green Mountains of northern Vermont, listed as off-grid, solar-powered, totally secluded, no Wi-Fi, no cell service, just the two of us, some candles, a wood stove, and Thefrist. It had hundreds of glowing reviews, words like peaceful, restorative, magical. The photos showed a weathered little log cabin, surrounded by pines, with a small fire pit out front and Atheny loft for sleeping, rustic but cozy. The host, a woman named Claire, lived in a farmhouse about half a mile up the trail. She messaged me back almost immediately when I booked and sent a long list of directions. There was no GPS signal, Once you passed through the last town, the place felt perfect, exactly the kind of thing you dream about doing but never actually make time, for we left the city early on a Friday morning, drove 6 hours north with stops for gas and diner coffee, and turned onto the dirt access road around 3:30 p.m. From there we crept through 5 miles of wooded trail, no signs, no other cars, just trees, our tires kicked up dust and pine needles. A deer darted across the path, and Neil muttered Jesus, but smiled for the first time all day. We reached the cabin around 4:15. It looked just like the pictures, maybe smaller in person, no electricity, just a few solar-powered lights inside. It had a tiny kitchen with a pump sink, a castron stove, a folding table with 2 mismatched chairs, and a steep wooden ladder leading to the loft bed. There were old board games stacked under the window, Scrabble, Clue, a deck of cards, and a guest book full of doodles and handwritten notes. That first evening was honestly wonderful. We cooked pasta over the camping stove, drank wine by candlelight, and played to lazy rounds of no-hull bats flitted outside the windows. By 10 p.m. we were drowsy and full, our muscles sore from the hike we'd done earlier at a state park near Montelier. I'll stay out here and have a smoke, Neil said, waving his hand toward the porch. You go, crash and up into the laughed old ladder creaking beneath me and curled into the blankets with a heavy sigh, the kind you don't even realize you are holding until you let it go. Everything smelled like cedar and melted wax. Sleep took me almost immediately. I'm not sure how much time passed. It could have been 20 minutes or 2 hours, but I was jarred awake by a loud solid bang, like something heavy hitting the side of the cabin. The nouveau knock, a thud, sharp, angry. Sat up so fast I smacked my head against the low beam ceiling before I could speak. Neil's voice cut through the thin air. Was that you? I blinked, still dazed. What number was it? Heckled back. I'm still outside. I didn't see anything. I tried to shake the fog from my brain. He sounded calm, but something in his tone was off. To measured, we'd camped before we were US said to nighttime noises, foxes, wind, even the distant calls of coyotes, but this wasn't nature. This sounded intentionally. Started to settle back down, convincing myself it had to be a branch falling, when another bang came, this time from opposite side of the cabin, someone swinging a heavy object against the wall, the kind of sound that vibrates would under your feet. I threw the blanket aside and climbed down the ladder barefoot. Neil met me at the doorway. He had the flashlight in one hand, and he looked pale under the yellow beam. Grab something sharp, he said, almost to casually. Go back up. What was it? Hadn't answered right away, and just pressed a hand against the old wood door and said, I didn't see anyone, but I think I heard footsteps. I felt ice in my stomach. Footsteps, I whispered. He nodded once. Go. I grabbed a serrated kitchen knife and a heavy corkscrew from the counter. It was all we had. I climbed back into the loft, trying not to cry. I curled on the bed, holding both tools with a death grip. My hands were shaking down below. Neil moved around quietly. He shut the main door and drew the bolt across it. There were large windows on 3 sides of the cabin, but no curtains, just thin screen panels, meant to let the breeze in. Anyone out there could see everything. I wanted him to come upstairs. I hated being separated, but I also understood he wanted to keep watch, wanted to protect us. If anything happened, then we heard it again. Screw, a dragging sound, slow and deliberate, like metal scraping against wood. It moved along one wall of the cabin, then stopped. Neil killed the flashlight. We held our breath. A few minutes passed. Then we heard footsteps crunching through dried leaves and underbrush. 123. Stop. Then again pacing. Hello, Neil shouted suddenly. Who's out there? Silence. Another 10 minutes crawled by. No movement. I almost convinced myself it was over, until something rattled loudly, like metal pipes clanging together. The stovepipe. Then footsteps again, slower this time. Whoever or whatever was outside knew we were inside there. They wanted us to hear them. They weren't trying to break in. They were trying to scare you, and it was working. Around midnight, Neil climbed into the loft and pulled the ladder up behind him. I don't like this, he murmured. They can see us, we can't see them. We sat together on the bed in total darkness, our backs to the wall, listening. The noises continued, banging, dragging, scraping. Then silence. Then footsteps again. I had never felt so hopeless. We were miles from anyone. No phone signal, no weapon, no help. I thought about running to the car, but the forest was pitch black. What if someone was waiting between us and the trail. Noel didn't speak much, just kept his ears perked and stared toward the dark outline of the loft window. I didn't sleep. I don't think he did either. It went on 4 hours. Every time we thought it was over, it started again, always from a new part of the cabin, always just an hour to make us stay on edge. At one point I thought I saw something move outside the window, but it could have been a trick of the moonlight. Around 5 o'clock a.m. we heard a rooster crowing in the distance. The woods began to brighten with a faint grey light, and just like that the noises stopped, not fade-stopped. Like someone had flipped a switch. We waited another hour before moving. Neil lowered the ladder, and we packed everything in silence. He walked the perimeter, while I stuffed our bags. There were no obvious footprints, no gouges, no sign of forced entry, nothing. But he pointed to a spot near the back wall, where the leaves were clearly disturbed. Something had been there. We drove down that dirt road faster than we should have. My hands didn't stop shaking until we hit the interstate. I messaged Claire that afternoon. She was apologetic, but quick to dismiss it. Probably a porcupine, she wrote. They sometimes rub against the walls. He didn't respond. We never left a review. We don't talk about that night much. Noel still thinks it was someone messing with us, maybe a hunter or a local who didn't want strangers nearby. As I heard those footsteps, I felt that fear, and I don't think it was a prank. I think someone knew we were alone, and they wanted to remind us just how far from help we really were. The footsteps outside persisted, slow and measured, as if the person walking wanted to make sure we heard every step. I pressed my back harder against the rough wooden wall of the loft, feeling the grain bite into my skin. My breath came in shallow bursts. The knife and corkscrew felt heavy in my trembling hands, as though their weight was a physical reminder of the danger closing in on us. Neil's voice came up from below, barely above a whisper, cutting through the silence like a blade. I'm going to check the perimeter. Stay quiet. Don't move. A shiver ran down my spine. His calm tone didn't match the panic clawing at my chest. I wanted to tell him to come back, to lock the door tighter, to just stay inside. But all I could do was nod to myself in the dark, outside. The footsteps circled the cabin, slow and purposeful, like a predator toying with its prey. Every few seconds, a shadow crossed the windows, elongated and warped by the flickering moonlight. I forced myself not to look, not to confirm the creeping terror that something was out there, watching, waiting. Suddenly, the window nearest the loft rattled violently. A sharp knock, hard and angry, shook the thin frame. My heart lurched in my throat. I gripped the knife tighter, knuckles white. Who's there? Neil called out from the floor below, his voice steady, but laced with tension. No answer. Just the rustle of the wind through the pines. Or maybe something else. The cabin's solar-powered lights flickered and died, plunging us into near total darkness. The faint glow of my phone screen was barely enough to see by. I swallowed hard, fighting the urge to scream or run. The silence that followed was suffocating. Time lost meaning. My thoughts spiraled. Was this a random trespasser, a stalker, or something worse, something that had been watching us since we arrived? A sudden creak echoed from the floor below. Neil was moving, closing doors, barricading windows maybe. The front door groaned under the weight of something heavy pressing against it. Then, a sound I will never forget, a low, guttural whisper, barely audible, drifting up to me through the cracked open loft ladder. Let me in. My blood ran cold. The voice wasn't just outside, it felt like it was inside my head, a nightmare bleeding into reality. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Another knock, this time on the bedroom window, urgent and insistent. Neil's footsteps hurried up the ladder. His face was pale, eyes wide in the faint light. We need to get out, he said. Now, I nodded, the cold fear turning into a wild, desperate energy. We grabbed what we could, knife, corkscrew, phone, and crept down the ladder, careful not to make a sound. Outside, the night seemed impossibly black, the forest pressing in around the cabin like a living thing. We slipped out the back door, hearts hammering, and ran toward the tree line. Behind us, the knocks continued, soft at first, then building into a frantic pounding that shook the walls. We didn't look back. Asterisk, asterisk. We stayed huddled in the loft long after the banging stopped. Neil moved silently through the cabin, checking every corner, every shadow, his flashlight cutting swaths through the darkness. The air was thick with something I couldn't name, unease, dread, something colder than the mountain air outside. The windows offered no refuge, thin screens that left us exposed like prey under a cage. Every creak of wood, every rustle outside set my nerves jangling like live wires. I gripped the knife tighter until my knuckles went white, the corkscrew digging into my palm, anchoring me to reality. Neil whispered, "We can't stay here. It's not safe." His voice was low, but steady, a fragile tether I clung to. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. The cabin, once promising peace and solitude, now felt like a trap, a faded postcard from a nightmare I hadn't yet escaped. We decided to wait until dawn, to move only when the weak morning light could shield us from whatever lurked outside. But even the coming light couldn't drown out the pounding of my heart. Hours crawled by. Every noise, every shadow stretched into something monstrous in the dark. At last, the first pale fingers of sunlight spilled through the screens. Neil crept down, careful not to make a sound, and unlocked the main door. I followed, still clutching my makeshift weapons. Outside, the world looked deceptively peaceful. Pine trees swaying gently, birds chirping as if nothing had disturbed their morning. But the dirt around the cabin told another story. Faint, partial footprints circled the building, sometimes abruptly stopping, as if whoever had been there was stalking, waiting. We didn't linger. Packing quickly, we left the cabin as if it might swallow us whole if we hesitated. The drive back was silent except for the hum of the tires on the dirt road. Our minds replayed the night's terrors over and over. The heavy thuds against the cabin, the unnatural footsteps, the cold weight on my chest when I realized we weren't alone. Back in town, we reported everything to the local sheriff. The officers were polite, but wary, their faces tight with disbelief masked by routine professionalism. They promised to check the cabin and patrol the area. Weeks later, the rental listing vanished from every site. Neighbors whispered about strange visitors and unexplained noises, but nothing official ever came out. Neil and I moved back to the city, our quiet weekend retreat shattered by the invisible terror that had haunted us in the woods. Even now, months later, I catch myself flinching at shadows, waking up to sounds that shouldn't be there. The silence we crave turned into a silence that screams, a void filled with unseen eyes watching, waiting. I sometimes wonder if whatever was there that night still lingers in the forest, lurking behind the trees and under the floorboards, waiting for the next lost souls seeking peace in the wilderness. The Green Mountains didn't save us, they marked us. And some silences are louder than any scream.